So good this morning, I'm talking about choosing heaven. And you might say, can you choose heaven? Well, yes, you can. Yes, you can. I don't care what's going on in the world. I'm living in the same world you are. But I'm choosing heaven. And I hope I might be able to convince you to do that too. Leo Buscaglia said, life is a paradise for those who love many things with a passion. How many things do you love with a passion? Many? Yeah. Good. That passion is leading you to your purpose and your joy. And I hope you'll take advantage of it. And if you don't have enough passion in your life, I hope you'll find some. I hope you will. This quote came from his book, Bus 9 to Paradise. It's a great book. And it's not about a bus trip, but it is about a trip. And he came upon this title for his book when he was in Melbourne, Australia, and he and his agent had been there talking about his latest book release, and they were out at the bus stop, and he saw a sign that said, Bus 9 to Paradise. Wouldn't that be lovely? How would you like to take Bus 9 to Paradise? I wrote in a blog post that deeply resonated with me, that title of the book and that quote, because yes, indeed, I love many things with a tremendous zeal and enthusiasm. Like Unity's founder said, that he fairly sizzles with zeal and enthusiasm to do what is his to do. So let's see if we can't get a little sizzling going on this morning, this cold morning. Let's see if we can't sizzle a little bit. So many things. There's so many things that I love, and I wrote another blog post this week about all the trees around my home, the house where I grew up, and all those beautiful trees. A huge sycamore tree. I've been thinking about that for about a couple of weeks. I wake up every morning thinking about those lovely trees and being in that house. Very, very modest house now. You might be surprised just how modest that home was that I grew up in. A home with 6 children and with a lot of love, though. A lot of joking and laughter, teasing each other. But I woke up several mornings thinking about those trees. That large sycamore tree in the front grew to be huge. It shaded our house and the neighbor's house too. And on the back we had a lovely sugar maple, beautiful in its shape. And the leaves, how gorgeous were they? And then another silverleaf maple that my dad groused about because the roots would push up the sidewalk. And my nephew reminded me that we took that they took that silver maple down just a few days before my dad died. And how sad that was. The tree had died, and what an amazing time that was. I had forgotten. He reminded me of that yesterday. He read my post. And there was a red cedar that my oldest brother planted. And I can just smell cedar now, and it'll take me back there. But what the post was about mainly was that we, at the very end of the lot, and Oak Ridge was a planned city. It was an engineered city, because the Army Corps of Engineers built Oak Ridge, a secret place where they could enrich the uranium for the atomic bomb. And so that's where I grew up, in a secret city. But when they built the streets, they created them so that every home would have a big yard, so they could have big gardens. We're not talking about just little lots. We're talking about pretty big lots where you could have a large vegetable garden, because we all families gardened at that time. And we had an apple tree, and I loved that apple tree. Absolutely loved it. It was a beautiful apple tree, but it was fairly close to a thorn tree. Well, we stayed away from that thorn tree. I'll tell you, it had big thorns, and it was a black locust. Long pods on it. If anyone's familiar with those trees, you didn't get close to them because they had evolved to have those thorns. They were prickly. And that's how they'd stayed alive, was to keeping animals away from them with those thorns, you see. So they had a purpose. But we sure stayed away from that thorn tree, I'll tell you. Because you could, even if you walked under it, some of the branches would fall and those thorns would still be on it. And you'd step on one of those thorns. Of course, we were all barefooted then, we didn't wear shoes. But the apple tree, how lovely it was, and it gave off those pheromones I was talking about earlier. That was encouraging. The apples gave off those pheromones and chemicals that encouraged all the other apples to ripen. And how sweet it was. I would sit in that tree. I just loved that tree. And I've been thinking about all the trees recently that were in my childhood, and just thinking about them takes me to heaven. Do you have a place like that you can go, whether it's in your physical world, in your mind, wherever it is, that can take you to heaven? You can choose that now, We have this lovely song we sing sometimes. Maybe I should have suggested it, but I didn't even think about it earlier in the week. I'm choosing heaven today. I'm choosing heaven today. Lovely song, isn't it? They do a better job than I do. But I don't know if anybody does a better job of choosing heaven than I do. We're not in a competition, We have our own way of choosing it. The subtleties. Thich Nhat Hanh passed on, didn't he? But what a legacy he left us. One of the things I remember about what he told us was that you can have peace anywhere you are. You can find peace in the most crowded room, in the midst of a trauma. We all have struggles, we know that. But you can still find a peace, a place of joy to go through those struggles. You can. We have affirmations like, everything I do adds beauty, order, and light to the world. We might even say, I can't wait what good comes from this. No matter what trouble you're in, there can be some good that can come from it. I promise. I promise. If you're struggling now, it will get better. For certain. So ancient Egyptians believed that upon their death they would be asked by the god Osiris 2 questions. and their answers would determine whether they could continue their journey in the afterlife. The first question was, did you bring joy? The second was, did you find joy? These goals then became their sacred charge in life. Isn't that amazing? If we were to find joy. And Leo Buscaglia said that when he was a teacher, he used to encourage his students to keep a journal as a record of their innermost thoughts and feelings. He said, occasionally I would ask that they would show them to me for our discussion. He said, I noticed a tendency in them to emphasize the negative in life, always. And these were just students, just children. There were the, oh, woe is me stories, he said. Oh, my life is miserable stories. Boring, depressing, confusing, unfair, cruel, and on and on and on. Each day seemed to be a test of endurance rather than an adventure. He said he would ask them, why don't you write of the joy in your life? It's really your choice. And he said that the answer was always that the bad things just seemed to have more impact than the good things. They seemed to take their joy for granted. Those bad things touched them more deeply than the moments of joy. And that notion is perhaps what has inspired a lot of study and research to determine the dominant mood of some popular songs from now and the past. The findings revealed that about 3/4 of the songs dealt with the pain and anguish of love. Did you know that? You know the type. My baby done left me. You broke my heart. I'm so alone. All day long, I sit and moan. Or a favorite, love is a battlefield. Whatever happened to love is a many-splendored thing, do you think? Not so popular. Soap operas so frequently capture that spirit. They go on every single day to infinity. I caught a glimpse of a soap opera the other day that my grandmother used to watch. Seems like 100 years ago, and I saw someone on there that was still acting in that same soap opera. I couldn't believe it. It's like, good heavens, you're still acting that same old sad story. Come on. Some people said it helped them with the troubles in their own lives. I don't believe it. I just simply don't believe you can watch that over and over and over again and not end up with a knot of worry in your stomach. I have a habit sometimes if I'm starting to read a book, and if it seems like it might not end well, I check the ending. And if it's not going to turn out well, I'm not going to read it. I don't. I put it down. I will not face something that's going to make me worry, whether it's a television program, a movie, a book, or anything else in life, even some of our current stories, I'm not going to entertain a sad ending. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to add any unnecessary worry to my life. Not going to do it. Not going there. I don't like that feeling where you've got a gnawing sense of worry in your stomach. You know you can feel it. Why in the world would you subject yourself to that on a daily basis? I remember my mother was laughing at my grandmother once because she was worried about how the soap opera was going to turn out. She just didn't know if so-and-so was going to be okay or not. She said to her, "You know, that's a story. That is a made-up story. So if you got anything like that in your life going on, and it's making you worry, I would say stop immediately. Cease. Desist. Stop." Now, I don't want to make light of those songs, though, that help us through difficult times, because they do. And we've talked about this before, that music can help us heal. And if we're going through a bad time where our baby done left us, our heart may be hurting. And we can't minimize that, because we all do have pains and sorrows we go through. And that's a fact. So listen to that music as long as you need to. And then one day you'll turn that same song on and you'll find out you've moved beyond it. Right? It's a change of consciousness, is what that is. You've lived through that, you've grown, and you've moved beyond it. And you'll probably find you won't ever be able to listen to that song again, because you've moved beyond it. Now, I was thinking the other day, too, about experiencing heaven on earth. And, you know, if you express that too much, though, about being passionate and joyful and with all that's going on in the world, people will think you're crazy. If you're still passionate about everything that's going on, and you know that there's still going to be a great ending, and you're not out there ranting and worried about this, that, and the other, go ahead and spread your joy anyway. Let the others rant. Let them be fearful. Let them be worried. There's no need for you. And I think that's another thing about choosing heaven today, is that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'll stay on this earth the number of days that I have a purpose, and I'm living that purpose. And there's nothing else that's going to take me away. And I know that. So I'm not going to spend any time being fearful. I'm going to do everything I can to be cautious and to protect myself and others. But I refuse to live in fear. I refuse to live in anger either. I'm not going to do it. So you see, I guess I do live in heaven, don't I? I've chosen it every single day that I get up. Will Bowen, who wrote A Complaint-Free World, said that for many, many years, 17 to be exact, he woke up in a low mood. You wouldn't think that, would you? He's a Unity minister, and he has become wildly prosperous by writing that book and coming up with that concept of a complaint-free world. They're bracelets, and we practiced this a few years ago, that every time you find yourself complaining, you'll flip your bracelet. It's elastic, and it flips back on you like a rubber band. Well, I sure didn't like that. I'm not into torture either. So all I did when I found myself complaining was just to turn it around. And he said in his book that the thing you could do is that if you will quit complaining and you'll be aware. See, aware is what you have to be. You have to be aware of what you're doing. You have to be mindful. That if you'll be mindful in hearing yourself, every time you complain, catch yourself and don't. And within 21 days, you'll change your habits and you won't complain anymore. You'll stop all that complaining. Nobody wants to hear it anyway. The only reason you're complaining is because you want validation. It'll make you feel better. So we need to just quit. We live in a wonderful society. Oh, so many great things going for us. Wonderful medical community, so dedicated to helping to keep us well. So much abundance of food, resources of every type. What a world we live in. We're so grateful. He spoke of starting each day with gratitude and how that changed his life. And it changed his life from waking up for 17 years in a low mood. You imagine? He changed that by just being aware of his thoughts and where they were taking him. Now, we don't pretend we don't all wake up in a low mood sometimes. Sometimes we do. We didn't get enough sleep. We're not breathing deeply enough because we're stressed. We didn't get enough sleep. We have too much on our plate. Those that love us forgive us if we find that we're in a low mood every once in a while. But the thing is, the more aware you become, the less you'll do it. Now, I've talked each week so far this year, 2022, of finding the kingdom. And where did Jesus tell us we would find the kingdom? Not up in the sky somewhere, but within is where he told us we'd find the kingdom. Has anyone ever heard of Rob Bell, former pastor of a mega church, huge fundamental church? I knew Alice would have. She and I read the same things. Well, he had this huge mega church, and once he started becoming aware that some of the teachings that they were espousing there weren't the teachings of Jesus. They were dogma, they were doctrine that Jesus never taught. They were things that the church encouraged you to think about sin and salvation and heaven and hell. He said once he became aware of that, he couldn't teach it anymore. He couldn't stand up there on a Sunday and teach that when he knew that Jesus didn't teach that. All the spiritual masters had not taught that. So next thing he knew, he found himself out of a job because those in the church wanted to hear that about sin and salvation. But thank goodness he woke up. He wrote a book, and Everything is Spiritual. He explores ideas about creation, love, connection, and how it shaped him into who he became. He said he remembers sitting on his grandma's porch when he was a child. He said, I'd ask for a 20. She'd reach in her bra, pull out a wad. She'd say, will a 10 and 2 5s do? He'd say, yeah. That's the kind of grandma she was. Anyone have a grandma like that? I had a mother like that. My grandma like that had already passed away long, long, long before I was born. But I had a mother like that. So Rob said when I was in high school in the mid-'80s, I used to visit her on her farm. He said we lived in Okemos, a suburb of Lansing, which was the capital of Michigan. He said I'd drive our Oldsmobile out into the country to her old brick farmhouse, which was surrounded by barns and all types of outbuildings, pastures and fields. He said I'd park in the driveway, then her dog Gunner would circle the car, pee on all 4 tires. He said she'd usually make dinner, and I'd stay. Then afterward, we'd sit on her porch in white wicker chairs. He said, I remember the wind. I remember that especially, how it would blow across the fields, among the barns, move the chimes hanging from the eaves on the porch. He says sometimes we'd talk, other times we'd just sit and enjoy each other's company. He says I was in that tenuous space between being a boy, being a man, trying to sort out who I was, where I was headed, surrounded by all the dramas that surrounded me in high school. He said everything around me was ranked. There were the best students, the best athletes, the coolest kids who got invited to all the right parties. Everywhere I turned, he said, there was someone better, someone smarter, faster, more tuned in to those ambiguous codes that only teenagers know. He said I wasn't. I was an outsider, and it pained me. It was painful being an outsider. He said I lived with a perpetual ache that I was always a step behind. And he had these questions he always asked himself, do I have what it takes? Will I ever find my place? Am I good enough? Some of us still have those questions, don't we? But he said, then I'd sit there in one of those wicker chairs. Those questions would evaporate. They'd fade away and listen to the wind. And in those moments, in that place, everything was all right, even when it wasn't. Do you know what I'm saying? It's that feeling of knowing that everything is all right, even when your eyes tell you, your ears, that it's not. The eyes and the ears of the world that are continually telling you there's something wrong. I think that's what heaven is. Thich Nhat Hanh said that we will always have struggles on this earth. He was repeating what the Buddha said and what Jesus said also in his book, The Living Buddha, The Living Christ. Yes, we have challenges. We're going to continue having those. But what I want to encourage you today is to know and to feel that everything is okay. When to human sense, it's not. I invite you to look beyond and to find the peace that goes beyond all understanding, to find heaven right here, right now, where we are. I wish you joy. I wish you peace. I wish you love. Thank you for your time.